Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Parent Pit Stop. Welcome back to all of you who were with me last week, and welcome to any of you who might be new this week. My name is Becky Adams, and I'm the Parent Engagement Manager for the Early Head Start and Head Start program. So you picked a great night to tune in. We're going to be talking about temper tantrums and all those button pushing types of behaviors that kind of just drive you crazy as a parent. And hopefully we'll be able, by the time this is over, to have you reframe how you look at those things to make life a little bit easier around those behaviors. So first off, before we get started and as we're waiting for people to come into the room, let me just remind you that if you're coming into the group, if you could sign your name into the comments section or tag a friend. You can also make comments there. I'll be keeping track of that as we go along, but we're just trying to keep attendance that way. So if you could put your name in the comment, that would be extremely helpful for us. What else? I'll be posting handouts. The handouts that I'm showing you tonight will go in the comments or on the Facebook page tomorrow, so that you have those to kind of refer back to, because we're going to cover a lot of ground tonight. So just to recap, I want to make sure everybody knows that I have my parenting guilt all wrapped up. If anybody was with us last week, we talked about putting your parenting guilt away because it highly undermines your ability to parent consistently. And you just kind of, write down everything that you feel guilty about and why you give in when you're trying to parent your children. And then as a reminder, you wrap it up in a nice pretty box so that it's in a visual spot for you to remember to be consistent and not give into that parenting guilt. Hi, Loretta. Hi, Ashley. Thank you for signing in. If anybody has any comments about anything that they may have tried, hi, Rosie. If they have anything that they might have tried last week, we talked about sleep, bedtime, structure, and consistency. If anybody wants to throw in any comment about any issue that you had, we can try to address that in the group. Or if you had any success or you did something different that worked better than you thought it would, we would love to hear about that as well. So feel free. Hi, Jessica. Feel free to put those in the comment section as well. You can also tag friends there. And we're going to get started with our topic tonight, which is temper tantrums, whining, button pushing, meltdown kind of behavior that we all go through with our children. And what we're going to try to do is get you to reframe how you look at those behaviors tonight. Because, there's nothing worse than being in a grocery store and having your child throwing a temper tantrum where you're in aisle 3 and the people in aisle 15 come looking to see what's going on. So, but in order to, make that work in a better way, first off, let's say the last thing that you want to do is get into a power struggle. Because the moment that you've engaged in a power struggle with your child has essentially won the battle. Whether you know it or you want to admit it, that's essentially what's happened. And if you get involved in reinforcing that behavior, then that behavior is going to increase in chance of happening again. So what we want to do is try to modify those behaviors and not reinforce them. Because once you start reinforcing those negative behaviors, those behaviors then become habit. Then it's not about modifying, it's about breaking habit and replacing behaviors. So let's, again, be willing to put your shades on to see things a different way and be open to, what I'm going to tell you. You're actually going to get some conscious discipline tonight. I mentioned that last week. Conscious discipline is something that we use in our classrooms. Our staff is versed in it. If new staff come on, they get versed in it. It's very effective. Couple of things about conscious discipline that's important to know. The first thing is that it's based on brain development, which is extremely important, because one thing I have always told parents is don't fight against things you can't change. And guess what you can't change? How a brain develops. So there's the first thing. The other thing that conscious discipline does is it really comes from a social and emotional perspective. And that's super important, especially if you have kids in our centers 3, 4, 5. Social emotional development happens lifelong, but 3, 4, and 5-year-olds is when kids start to really get those lessons in social and emotional stuff. And so that's super important. And we're going to tie that up at the end, so you'll be able to kind of make some connections there. So the first thing that I want to tell everybody is, if you've been in a group with me before, you got this bad news. If you haven't been in a group with me before, you're going to get it tonight. So just try to support each other. Here is the brain. And you'll see the green shading. That is called the frontal lobe, and that sits right behind your forehead. It doesn't matter if you're 5 or 15 or 51, that frontal lobe is the part of the brain that makes good choices, good decisions, can resolve conflict, can brainstorm and problem solve. This is not developed fully in anybody until they're 26 years of age. So the bad news is, if you think that your kids are going to just grow out of some stuff, they're not until they're about 26. At 26, that part of the brain is fully developed. And so what we're doing now is we're just trying to draw kids to the front of their brain through some training. They don't realize it's training, but that's exactly what we're doing. So even for adults, that's where, you make your best decisions, good choices, you're calm. So that's important to know, because if somebody is not in their frontal lobe, you're not going to be able to reason with that person. What we often find is this other part right here. The blue part, which sits back from the frontal lobe, is your emotional, the emotional part of your brain. And when a child is throwing a temper tantrum or whining or having a meltdown, then that's the part of the brain that they're in. If an adult is having an argument with their spouse and it's heated and it gets to that place where everybody's just shouting because they want to be heard and nobody even remembers what the argument's about anymore, adults are in the emotional part of their brain. There's not going to be any resolution when it comes to anything if they're in that part of the brain. So that's where temper tantrums come from. That and one other place. Our kids between 3 and 5 and 6 and 7, until they're exposed to this a lot, really can't even identify their emotions, which makes it really difficult. So they are little bodies with huge emotions that they can't verbalize, they can't understand, they can't identify, and therefore that becomes so overwhelming that that's where temper tantrums come from. So this handy dandy little chart, which will be posted, is something that you might see in one of our classrooms. We have feeling buddies. These faces are all represented there. And we start to help children identify what it is that they're feeling. So, and also put language to that. So the thing that happens when a child is having a temper tantrum or a meltdown or whining, typically that part of the brain is when you have a need that you want to have met that can't be met at that time. And therefore, like they want that candy bar in the store and you're consistently saying no, and then it just escalates to that meltdown. So one of the things that you don't want to do in those times when your child is in that part of their brain is say things like, in an elevated voice, stop being mad, stop that behavior, because that child is in a part of their brain where they're not going to listen to you reason with them. What you have to do during those periods, and this is where some of that parental reframing comes in, is you have to be present, you have to be calm, and you have to be empathetic. So you might say things instead, and this is something that our staff would say to a child in a classroom. I know it's really hard when you can't get what you want. I know, just breathe. Take a deep breath. And while you're doing that, you are also taking some deep breaths, because the thing that you need to do is remain calm and set the example even in a temper tantrum, even though you can feel, that red coming in your neck and your hair standing on the back of your neck. That's one of the ways we reframe, and that's where social and emotional development can begin with a child. The other interesting thing about that is that, if you ask parents a characteristic that you want to see their children have as they get older, 9 times out of 10, parents will say compassionate, empathetic. Well, that all starts, believe it or not, in moments like that. One of the things, a term that we use a lot is teachable moments. And in parenting, every moment is a teachable moment. Whether you know you're teaching your children something at any given moment of the day, chances are you are. All eyes are on you. So if they see you out of control, you're never going to be able to teach somebody how to gain control if you're out of control. Now, I realize that's really tricky, but here's another thing about conscious discipline that I like. The best parenting curriculums that I've taught, and I've taught a lot of them, I can tell you that 20 years ago when I used to teach parenting curriculums, the focus was on what we can do to our kids to make them behave, or what we can do to our kids to make them, break out of that behavior. As research has gone on, and the more we've learned, one of the key components in a good parenting curriculum is for parents to look at themselves and some of the things that maybe they're doing that, whether they know it or not, is really making life more difficult. So, for example, we've all been in the store when we've heard, maybe a mom has reached her limit or a dad's reached his limit, and, the stuff starts. But you're trying to get a kid to calm down when you're not calm. So the first step for you in conscious discipline is the STAR. The STAR is stop, take a deep breath, and relax. So this is something that you can post all over your house if you have to, as a reminder to stop, take a deep breath, and relax in those moments when you're feeling like you just want to explode. And to refocus you back into taking those breaths and being present for your child when they're having the meltdown, and be empathetic to what they're feeling, and to be calm. So sometimes you have to walk away for a minute to just kind of get yourself together, and that's fine. But that's the key in addressing temper tantrums, is one, understanding where that temper tantrum is coming from. Your child is an emotional state in their brain. There's not going to be any reasoning. Their emotions are bigger than their bodies. They don't necessarily understand everything they're feeling. They can't verbalize how mad they are. They just know that they're upset, and you have to talk them through that. So stop, take a deep breath, and relax. And then the other thing is, at some point, not in that moment maybe, but before that moment happens, it's really important to teach our children the skill of breathing. There's been a lot of research done about the fact that we literally, we're breathing, but we're not taking those deep cleansing breaths. We're not taking those breaths that relax us, that put us in that different frame. Taking those deep breaths are part of what calm us all down and help bring us to that frontal lobe, where we can then discuss a situation, resolve the situation, problem solve with the child, and that kind of thing. So these are in all of our classrooms. And these are little icons that represent different breathing strategies. So this will be on our page. So there's your STAR. You have a faucet, a balloon, and a pretzel. So I'm just going to demonstrate one. The other thing that will be back is the step-by-step instructions. This one's in Spanish, but I'll have English too. So the balloon. So let me just say that when kids come into our classrooms, one of the things that happens in circle time early on, in calm time, because this is when you want to start teaching your kids the skill, is when they're in this part of their brain and not back here, is they talk about these breathing icons and demonstrate and teach the kids how to do that. So in a balloon, the kids would put their hands on the top of their head, and then they take deep breath in and they blow up their balloon, and then favorite thing of kids is letting that air out. And then they do that several times. And they also teach the other ones, which, like I said, the instructions are on the back. So that way, when it comes time to have a child breathe, they have these techniques at their disposal to help them do that. So, funny story, a parent told me one time that, they took some of these home, and when we used to do these in person, and if you can print these out, you definitely can. If you can't, I'm going to give you the Conscious Discipline website. Also, in the comments, you can go to that website and sign up for an account to get free access to lots of printable material. So it doesn't cost you anything. They have English and Spanish, and some of the things that I'm showing you tonight will be there. But if you have an issue with a printer or whatever and you need it, let one of us know and we'll make sure that you get this. But back to my story. So this parent took some of these home and started hanging them up around the house. And the child got up the next day and said, "How do you know about that?" Because they were so used to that being a school thing. So when they found out that their mom knew, but the interesting thing is kids get this so quickly that if you're having a moment and you're not calm, they'll be the first one to say, "Mommy or Daddy, I think you need to take a deep breath and do the balloon with me." That's happened before too. So breathing is really, really important. One of the things that's happening a lot across the country now, they're putting yoga more and more into schools now because they're finding that helping kids learn how to center themselves and to do that breathing and the stretching and all of that kind of stuff really has a great effect on behavior. And they've done this in some schools where they used to have like detention or in-school suspension or whatever the case might be. And they instituted these types of yoga programs, and behavior improved remarkably. So, if it can do it in a school, it can definitely do that in your home. So there's a couple of things. When the meltdown's going on, your child is not in the part of their brain where you're going to be able to reason with them. You have to keep track of where you are in your brain. Are you in your frontal lobe? Are you in your emotional state? Because we need to have like that perfect storm going on to rectify this. And always keep in mind, again, that when your child is in that state, they probably are having a difficult time understanding the emotion, identifying the emotion, verbalizing the emotion, and that's why you're seeing the behavior. So that can put that whole thing in a whole different frame. If you know that they're not just doing it for attention. Parents have said they're just doing it for attention, which is another thing we're going to talk about. So conscious discipline takes away the whole theory on attention-seeking behavior. That's something that we parents came up with before we understood all of this brain stuff and everything that I just described to you. So when kids are needing connection, then sometimes those behaviors will come out. It's not attention seeking, it's connection seeking. Because the other thing about conscious discipline is that it focuses on the relationship with your child and the relationships in your family. And when kids need to feel that connection, we sometimes say they're just looking for attention. And that's where we need to reframe again. So I'll give you the perfect example that we always use. Your kids have been in the room for an hour, and the phone rings and you get on it, and these kids that didn't want anything to do with you for an hour are suddenly tugging at you saying, "Mommy, mommy, 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 mommy." And that sometimes makes us lose our cool. But the interesting thing about that is what's happening is they're looking for that connection. They just want to know that that connection is still there. And typically, if you just say, "Hold on one second, what is it?" eye contact. They'll tell you, I just want to tell you I love you, and off they'll run. So they're just kind of doing a connection check. That's what that's really all about. So if you can kind of, reframe, how you approach that, or think about changing how you approach that, it can change things immensely. Because the alternative to that is when you're saying, hold on, I'm on the phone. Can you see I'm on the phone? Stop talking, I'm on the phone. That can go on for 15 minutes. But if you take 30 seconds or less to excuse yourself, give the attention, connection, then they're off and running. So the other interesting thing about that is that there's a really great parenting curriculum called Circle of Security. And I don't know if anybody's ever taken it, but I'm just going to give you a blurb of it. The Circle of Security says that children will leave their parents and venture off on this kind of imaginary circle to increase their independence, explore their world. They really want to know that you're still there, but they kind of venture off from you. But when they need that reconnection, they circle back and they come back to you, and then they go off again, and then they come back. It's this constant thing that's going on in this kind of circular kind of motion. And if you watch a toddler carefully, it happens for kids of all ages, but it's really noticeable when it comes to toddlers, who will crawl off of your lap, go off for a little while, then come back. That is all Circle of Security. That's them going off, then needing that refuel from their parents, that connection, and coming back for that. So the same thing happens with kids of all ages. The phone is an example of that, where they've been off doing their thing. They just need to reconnect for a second, and then they go off again. And that's kind of a cycle that happens all the time with kids. So another element of conscious discipline is that connection. Connection requires 4 critical elements, and those are eye contact. So sometimes that requires us stopping what we're doing, as busy as we are, and giving that 100% attention with eye contact down to their level. That takes far less time than the argument of saying, I'm doing the dishes, can you wait, or whatever the case might be. The other thing is presence, being totally present, giving your undivided attention. There's a saying that I hear all the time now, and it just rings true the more I hear it. Kids need your presence, not presents. So that's what kids really crave, is having you present for them. And that can be a hard balance, because yes, there are times where you have to cook dinner so everybody will eat. So you just have to fit those times in for that connection to happen, because that's how relationships are built. And if you have children that are really young, now is the time to do it, because if you don't, trying to establish that with a child who is a pre-adolescent is a little trickier. So then already having the relationship and the connection, and it just kind of continues on no matter what developmental trying state they go through. Touch, so hugs, cuddling on the couch, watching movies, those kind of things that we have to make time for sometimes in our busy schedules and work schedules. Those are super important to kids. And then playfulness, actually, taking the time to play with them and to joke around and have a good time. Those are all super important. So that will also be on the page. So if anybody has any questions, please pop that into the comments, or you need anything clarified, let me know. All right, so let's see. So the feeling icon chart, the other thing I was going to mention, this is a great thing to hang up because everybody in the family can use it. And before too long, once a young child uses it a lot, you can direct them there to say, show me how you're feeling. They can go to the face, point to the face, then you start to develop that language. This is something that takes place in the classrooms all the time. Oh, you're mad. You're feeling mad. And so now they're hearing the words, that they're connecting the words to the emotion. The other thing about the breathing too that I want to mention, one of the things that's really important for kids to understand, and this is where yoga also comes in, is that kids don't connect that they're having a physiological reaction to their emotion. So if you can get their body to connect to that, that will help you develop that language and their understanding of their emotions. So when you're doing things like the balloon, and you're, you've got your arms tight and then you let it go and everything kind of, like balloons do, then they're going to start to see that difference between feeling tight and then letting it all out. So, the other thing that sometimes people will do is, they might sit in circle time and have everybody put their legs out in front of them and say, okay, squeeze your legs as tight as you can. Because one of the things that kids need to understand is that connection between their brain, their emotions, and what their body's doing. So parents and staff can say things to children when they're, upset. I see your face is red and you're crying. It looks like you're upset. So, anytime you can replace conversation with, kind of like that headbutting power struggle thing, is what's going to help you break down those types of things. So this is all about reframing and looking at things differently and coming to an understanding of why children are behaving the way that they are, because by doing that, then it can change your approach in how you deal with that. So if you understand that, kids and adults are in different brain states, and sometimes that's part of the problem because both of us are in the emotional state, the child and the parent. That makes it super hard to try to get that under control. And again, you have to be really careful what you're reinforcing, because if you are, here's an interesting thing about kids. If kids are looking for connection and they have a choice between no attention from you and negative attention, guess what they're going to pick every time? The negative attention. So if they know that they need to pull out the stops to get you to address them, even if it's because you're yelling, negative attention is attention. So then every time you do it, you're reinforcing the behavior to happen again. So it becomes this never-ending cycle. And then you get down the line, because once things happen consistently for 2 to 3 weeks, it then becomes habit. And then it takes at least 3 weeks to break the habit. So really kind of looking at those things and doing some pre-planning on behavior is also helpful. And, when I say this to parents, sometimes they're like, okay, well, how do you pre-plan for that? Well, I'm going to tell you. So let's say mad and temper tantrums is a problem. In a calm time, that's when you can have a conversation, because in a calm time, everybody's in their frontal lobe. And you can say things like, when you get angry, it's not okay to hit your brother, or it's not okay to break things. Let's think of some things that you can do that would be okay when you get angry. And you can actually come up with a list, and believe it or not, kids are really good at coming up with some solutions on their own. They might say things like, I can scream into a pillow, I can punch a pillow. So these have to be things that are acceptable, and that when that moment comes, you're going to allow that to happen because it's on the list. And you can then have something to refer them to when that moment happens. You can, and you don't even need any words. If that happens, you can put a pillow next to them if they've chosen to, scream into a pillow. And you can just say, I know you're upset. Here's your pillow if you need to scream into your pillow. Then that conversation will come back, and typically, I don't know, sometimes for me, a good scream is all it takes. So, it's just a lot of talking about things out of the moment in the calm time when everybody's in their frontal lobe. And keep in mind with children, I've had parents say to me, especially kids 3 to 5, I feel like I'm constantly repeating myself. You are repeating yourself. And the reason for that is because we know that kids learn in early education just a few different ways. One is hands-on experience. Guess what? Constant repetition and role modeling. Those are the three basic ways that really young kids learn. So, if you're kind of, in your emotional state a lot, their kids are taking everything in they see around them. So if you're saying one thing but modeling something different, they're going to pay attention to what's being modeled and not what's being said. And again, constant repetition, because that's what kids need. For kids to learn a new skill, it requires that repetition, it requires that hands-on experience. So even emotions, and social and emotional development is something that is repetitious, and it takes time over and over again for a child to really get into that grasp of the concept. So there's that. So that's basically why temper tantrums happen, meltdowns happen, the whining happens. If we go back to our emotional state, in this state, children are asking internally, am I loved? So how you respond to that emotional state is answering that question for them. So that's why it's super important to be calm, to stop, take a deep breath and relax, to talk, to just be talking while you're present, being empathetic, modeling that. And the developmental need during that period is for connection. So there's that connection word again. Kids constantly need to feel connected. And when they're out of control like that, they're not feeling connected. So what they need from us as the adult is just that presence, just so they know that we're there at their worst possible moment. A trigger for this state can be things not going your way. So again, child wants something, you say no, it's not going to happen, and then it's on and popping after that. So behaviors exhibited in this state are verbal and social aggression, blame and guilt. And we're going to talk more about structures that you can use later on. But that just kind of gives you an idea where kids are in that emotional state, what they're looking for. And sometimes the worst behavior is when a child needs that connection the most. So if you can try to reframe that again and keep that in your mind, then you can change the way you approach it, you look at it, you see it, because again, just keep in mind, we're teaching kids to identify emotion, verbalize emotion, and again, sometimes the emotion